I used to think a family dinner was the safest place in the world. I was wrong, and it took a check with 5 numbers on it to teach me that. This is the night my father taught me exactly what I was worth to him, and the night my grandmother, without saying a word to anyone, taught me the opposite. My family left me with a $10,472 dinner bill and called me a loser on their way out the door. I am Emily, 29, a management consultant from Denver, and I didn't understand what was happening until the chairs were already empty. My father, Richard, had planned this dinner as his retirement celebration. My older brother, Tyler, sat across from 3 men in suits I'd never met before that night. Halfway through dessert, Dad stood up, patted Tyler's shoulder, and said, "We've got somewhere to be." My mother, Diane, was already reaching for her coat. Tyler leaned toward me, grinning like it was a joke between friends. "Come on, Em, you've got this, right? Try not to be such a loser about it." He laughed like he expected me to laugh too. I didn't. My stomach dropped, slow and heavy, like something inside me already understood before my brain caught up. The waiter was walking toward our table with a leather folder tucked under his arm, and something in his face told me this wasn't going to be that simple. His name was Marcus, the waiter, and he set the folder down gently, like he already knew something I didn't. "Whenever you're ready, ma'am," he said, then walked away before I could even respond. I stared at that closed folder for a long time, not touching it. 2 weeks earlier, my grandmother, Elena, had called me out of nowhere and asked me to come by her apartment for coffee. She never explained why, and that wasn't like her. She just handed me a cup of decaf, complained it tasted like dishwater, same as she always did, and then asked me one question completely out of nowhere. "Emily, how many times has your father forgotten his wallet at dinner?" I laughed it off at first. She didn't laugh with me. She just nodded slowly, like she was quietly checking something off a list only she could see. I didn't think about that conversation again until I was sitting alone at a table with a bill attached to my name, and no one left beside me at all to help split it. The dinner had been framed as a celebration, 30 years at the firm, Dad's retirement, a night for family to gather and toast him. But the 3 men at the far end of the table weren't family. They were investors, there specifically to hear Tyler pitch his struggling company. Dad had called it a retirement dinner on purpose, so I'd never think to ask why strangers in suits were sitting at our table. My older brother, Tyler, spent the appetizer course rattling off numbers that didn't quite add up, confidence in his voice that didn't match what was in his eyes. Dad kept steering the conversation back toward me. "Emily's brilliant with finances," he told the investors, smiling wide. "She doesn't spend much on herself, so she's good at holding on to other people's." The table laughed. I realized somewhere between the salad and the entree that Dad had counted on exactly this, that I'd notice everything and say nothing, because I never made a scene in front of strangers. I wasn't family at that table tonight. I was quiet collateral. Dad raised his glass before the entrees had even arrived at the table. "To the most dependable person I know," he said, looking directly at me, and the whole table lifted their glasses along with him. "It should have felt good." "It didn't feel good at all. You've always handled money so well," he added, laughing lightly. "Honestly, it's a relief for the rest of us. Someone has to be the adult." One of the investors chuckled. My mother, Diane, smiled quietly down at her plate, saying nothing. Nobody at that table knew what that sentence actually meant except me. It meant she'll cover whatever the rest of us don't want to. Later, when Tyler joked about my safe little job, some of us actually took risks. That's the difference. Nobody laughed out loud, but nobody stopped him either. The silence said enough on its own. I smiled through it because that's what I'd always done at that table. That's the part I'm still working on forgiving myself for, not the smiling itself, but the reason I'd learned to. I didn't understand the wallet question until I counted backward, 3 separate dinners in the last year. Every time, Dad patted his jacket pockets, frowned, and said, "I must have left it in the car," and every time I quietly paid. I'd noticed the pattern before, honestly, somewhere in the back of my mind, but everyone else always treated it like an honest mistake, so I learned to treat it that way too. Afterward, he'd tell me how proud he was of me for never making it a thing. I never made it a thing. That was always the unspoken job. Grandma Elena had watched this happen at every one of those dinners without saying a word, until that coffee visit 2 weeks ago, when she finally asked her question out loud, like it had been waiting inside her for years. I hadn't understood what she was really asking me that day. Now, sitting alone at a table for 6 with a folder I still hadn't opened, I finally did. I needed to know exactly how this particular night ends. 3 times, I told her that day, answering her question far too late to matter. Maybe 4. Grandma Elena set her decaf down without taking a sip. "Your father asked me to help pay for this dinner as a gift for his retirement. When I called the restaurant myself to confirm the details, they mentioned it was booked as a private party of 8, business attire requested. Retirement dinners don't usually ask guests to dress for business, Emily. She let that sit a moment. That's when I understood what this really was. I felt something shift in my chest, quiet and cold. And every time he forgot his wallet, she went on, what did he tell you afterward? That he was proud of me. That I never made a fuss. She nodded once, slow, like a door closing somewhere far away. Your father has never once forgotten his wallet in his life. I sat with that. Why tell me now? I asked. She picked her cup back up. Because I already did something about it. You'll understand everything soon, sweetheart. Back at the restaurant, Dad hadn't rushed out the way it might have looked to a stranger. That was the part I kept turning over again. He'd stood up slowly, checked his watch, said goodbye to each investor by name, shaken hands twice with the loudest one, and only then turned to me. You've got this right, same words Tyler had used minutes earlier. Rehearsed maybe, or just familiar by now. He didn't ask if I minded. He didn't ask if I even could. He simply assumed it, the way he assumed most things about me. My mother, Diane, kissed my cheek on her way past like this was any other ordinary Tuesday. Tyler squeezed my shoulder without quite looking at me. You're a lifesaver, Em, seriously, just don't make it weird when the bill comes. Not a thank you, a warning dressed up as one. Nobody at that table looked back once they reached the door. I sat there in a room full of strangers, watching my family disappear into the parking lot without a single glance behind them. She never once touched her purse. Marcus came back around the table, quieter this time, and crouched slightly beside my chair instead of asking if I was ready. Miss Carter, he said gently, your grandmother asked me not to explain anything until you'd read this first. He set down a second envelope, cream-colored, my name written across the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. My hands went cold before I'd even opened it. She came in after she discovered the reservation, Marcus said, the one under your father's name, booked weeks ago. She told us that if his party happened exactly as planned, this envelope was to be given to you, and only you, before anything else. I looked up at him. She knew it would be tonight. She knew the date the moment she found the reservation, he said. She just didn't know if your father would actually go through with it until he did. I looked back down at the envelope, my own name in handwriting I had known my entire life, and I still hadn't opened it. Inside the envelope was a letter in Grandma's handwriting. Your father asked me to help fund this dinner as a retirement gift, then asked me separately to invest in Tyler's company. He showed me the records himself, Tyler's losses, his own debts, loans he never mentioned to you. 2 of the 3 investors told me afterward they were only staying tonight out of respect for your father. They have no intention of investing. My chest loosened just slightly. The letter ended, I couldn't stop this dinner from happening. I could make sure it cost you nothing. Marcus set the actual check down next. $10,472. I handed him my card, hand steady even though nothing else was. He stepped away, then came back a moment later, card in hand, untouched. My manager voided it before it processed, he said quietly. Your grandmother left instructions days ago to cover whatever the final total came to, no matter the amount. I stared down at the folder, empty now except for a receipt marked 0, and the letter still open in my other hand. Here's what actually changed in the end. Dad's pitch fell apart within days, not because I exposed him, but because his own numbers did, the same numbers he'd handed Grandma himself, hoping she'd invest. The 2 investors who'd stayed out of politeness never came back around. Nobody yelled that week. Nobody was humiliated in front of a crowd. The room just quietly stopped believing him, one conversation at a time. I'm still figuring out how to sit across a table from my father, and I don't think that part heals fast. Grandma Elena didn't fix my whole family that night, and she never claimed she could. She just made sure I stopped paying for a seat I never should have had to earn, and made sure the money never actually left my hands in the first place. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever quietly paid for peace at your own family's table like this, subscribe so you don't miss what else Elena left me, and tell me, has your family ever mistaken your kindness for your job?